A Red Lipstick Club production.
Welcome, lovers and friends, to the first meeting of the Red Lipstick Club. I'm your host, Ana Cierra, and you can join myself and occasionally maybe a special guest weekly for conversations on love, sex, relationships, just life in general, and always from a real grown-ass perspective. We'll obviously start off every meeting with a little housekeeping. Make sure to follow me on social media, in particular Instagram, where you can find me at Official Red Lip Club, and on YouTube at Red Lipstick Club. Soon I'll be uploading live recorded versions of the podcast to my YouTube channel. Should be exciting. We'll see how this goes. This is my very first episode, so hopefully you guys will love it and you'll be engaged and excited, and give me some feedback. I love to talk about everything with the listeners, and I really want to know your opinions and your thoughts on some of the content I'm going to cover today. I had to bring this one up first because it's personal to me, and it's something that I guess a position I never thought I would find myself in, and that would be single over 30. And I know it sounds crazy, and obviously there are women out there that are single over 30 and 40 and 50, but I've never been married. I don't have any children. And I think not having both of those experiences, and I'm over 35 now, has really shaped kind of how I've looked at life. And I feel at this point you go a little bit into panic mode. I'm trying hard not to do that. I'm rallying all my single ladies out there that are in the same position for us to combine our powers and see if we can figure this shit out, because I don't understand why there's so many amazing women that are single over the age of 30. It's crazy to me. I did do some research because, I am a sports junkie, and when I used to do my sports podcast, I had to have the numbers to back up my opinions, because if you don't do that, it's no point in trying to form an analysis. So I had to do some research on this. I wanted to know, am I making this up in my head? Is this really an issue, a problem in America, single women over 30? Well, the Pew Research Report basically told me it's a personal problem, because apparently only 19% of women between the ages of 30 to 49 in America are actually single. And I have thought for the longest that number had to be larger. It had to be larger. But in fact, apparently I am part of another minority group, and that is women aged 30 to 49 that are still single in America. And what I've found to be even more interesting is, of all adults, 47% of Black Americans are single. We had the highest number the highest percentage of single people of all adults. And that would make it so clear why more than 70% of Black women are not married. So let's dive into that a little bit and really let that sink in. I know I have women from all groups and demographics. Hopefully some men are chiming in right now. And we've recently seen a few men pop up that are talking about a demographic of men, high earners, high earning men, usually men that are making, 6 figures or more. And how there's a lot of women out there looking for a high earning man, and they don't really meet the qualifications and credentials to have that. And I look at that situation and think to myself, I'm not even looking for a high earning man. At this point in my life, I just want you to be able to successfully take care of yourself, as I'm taking care of personally myself. And when we come together, we hopefully will be in an even better position, because we were already handling our business apart. And it's interesting that even without having the expectation of looking for a higher earning man or a higher earning man, it's not a pool that I'm looking at. I'm literally swimming in a puddle, if that. I don't think this puddle would cover the bottom of my shoe at this point. That's how small the pool is. And I definitely didn't do myself any favors by moving to Arizona, of all places. I think for many of us over 30, and I don't know about your personal situations, but I invested a good decade into a relationship that went absolutely nowhere. And when I entered that relationship, I had high hopes for that. I figured that was going to be my personal forever. I was going to get married, have a family, and when that relationship dissolved and I was left with no marriage, not even a divorce, not even a kid to say, okay, I got this awesome kid out of the deal. When I left with nothing, I don't think I really processed how losing that much time to one person with, in my opinion, nothing to show for it, how it would impact me, and also kind of be a hit on your self-esteem as a woman. Because once you hit a certain age, you start to almost feel a little washed up. And that's a scary position, because now you're almost looked upon as being desperate, because at this point, if you are in a relationship and you want children, you don't have the luxury to take a few years to get to know your partner. You basically have to get started on kids right away and hopefully squeeze in a couple before you hit that point where it's extremely dangerous to have children on your own. So I think, unfortunately, a woman over 30, we tend to get a bad rap because we're in a position where our biological clock is ticking for those of us that are looking to have children. And I go back and forth on that because I feel like my lifestyle currently is pretty chill. And thinking about, do I still want children? Especially when I'm now in the position where I am dating older men, a lot of them are at the point where they don't want anymore. And that's a little scary too, is wow, I'm about to age out. I'm going to age out before I even get the opportunity, unless I date somebody younger. And I want to know, women out there, how are you feeling about dating younger men? Like, now that you are single in your 30s, maybe you're in your 40s listening to this, or 50s and you're single. Basically I'm talking to any woman over 30 at this point. How do you feel about dating younger men? Send me a comment, leave a comment if you're watching this on YouTube. Tell me how you feel about that, and maybe tell me how your experience has been with that. I have attempted to do that a few times myself. I didn't want to, like I said, further limit my pool to select from. And honestly, sometimes I found that some older men are honestly not mature at all. And I have had some incredibly, thought-provoking conversations with some younger gentlemen, but I found outside of that, we really didn't have very much in common. And I almost felt like I was holding them back a little bit. And I think back to when I was dating men substantially older than me when I was younger. And I think back now, like, what did we have in common? We had nothing in common. And it's crazy to think about that now. And honestly, what I have found is I need to have somebody closer to my age, as far as, having things in common and things of that nature. But what I'm running into, and tell me if this is something that you are also experiencing, is I'm running into adult men that are still trying to find themselves. And some of those processes that normally men would have, in their early 20s, a lot of them are not hitting that point in their life until their mid to late 30s. And I'm still dealing with very emotionally immature individuals. And now, what is that to blame? Some of them have had fathers at home, 2-parent households. Some of them have not. So I can't necessarily blame it on that. I don't know if this is a society issue. I don't know if we've, quote unquote, gone soft and not held men accountable. And I think about growing up My parents got married extremely young. As far as I'm concerned, my dad was 22, my mom was 20. I am now the product of a very terrible divorce. They're married over 20 years, but their divorce definitely had an impact on my relationships with men and how I kind of look at marriage. But regardless of that, my parents were really young when they got married. And my grandpa told my dad, hey, you better lock that down before somebody else gets her. And there seemed to be a priority on marriage. And I was looking at, back in the 70s when my parents got married, I was curious, what was the average age to get married compared to now? And looking at now, men today, they get married at an average age of 30. In the 70s, it was 23. And women now get married at an average age of 28, and it was 21 in the 70s. And mind you, this is the people that are not single. So you're probably thinking, it gave you just a little bit more leadway, a little bit more time to kind of figure it out. And I think about my parents, and they were right around those two age points, 20 and 22, 21 and 23. So they were right there. And I wondered what happened to, kind of building your foundation together. You didn't have to come into the situation with all your pieces together. You could come in broke. I remember my dad telling me a story about him and my mom, sitting on the floor eating pizza, and he had just gotten his first check from his job that he had finally gotten, and they had a twin bed and no other furniture in their new apartment. And he went and got a Pizza Hut pizza. And this is when they came back from Australia. So I don't know if I think it was maybe before they were right before they went to Australia, actually. But anyway, they were, they're young and married, and he could only afford to get a pizza, but that was a big deal. A Pizza Hut pizza back in the day, I don't know if you're an 80s baby, that's when they still had the stained glass covers on the lighting, and you actually went in there and there was ambiance in a Pizza Hut. And Pizza Hut pizza used to be litty. It was so good. And that was just such a big deal for them. That struggle was real, but they had each other and they made it work, and they were able to build a family and provide a comfortable life for their family. And they were okay with building that foundation together. And I don't know if I still see the same urgency to build foundation. Another thing I want maybe people to look at, tell me how you feel about this, but in particular with Black women when it comes to education. And you think about so many women that were the product of single parent homes. And you're thinking, if men are waiting longer to get married, then women have to kind of figure it out, right? At this point, well, we're going to have to get a degree or something. We have to take care of ourselves. We're not married. We're not building a foundation with somebody else. We have to do it on our own. And it's interesting because women, they did a poll recently, a few years back, and they found that Black women that were earning master's degrees were earning them 5-2 to Black men. 5-2. So now you're thinking about a lot of Black women that first off are staying in school longer. It's probably impacting their career options. Their education level, their emotional maturity, but also just the conversations that they're looking to have are at a completely different level than, the average housewife that was coming out before, a woman that was getting married at 18. She hasn't lived any life at that point. When you have women going to get master's degrees, that's a lot of life you're living if you're going that far in school. So you're a little bit older at that point. Unless you're a genius, you're not earning a master's degree at 20. So it's interesting how putting off marriage is pushing women to get more education, but then it's also putting women in more of a power struggle, I'm noticing. And even for myself personally, I had to be able to provide for myself at a certain level. And even looking at maybe buying a home, I have to think about it and think about doing it on my own. My parents didn't have to do that. They had each other to do that with. So it's kind of scary. Now, obviously, I said I didn't really help myself by moving to Phoenix. I don't know if any of you out there are maybe thinking, did I move to a city that set me up for failure? Or do I still live in a city? Am I in the same city I grew up in where it's setting me up for a relationship failure, limiting my options in my pool? And I'm wondering how many of you have ever taken the time to actually look up some of the best cities to date. And it's interesting, I took some time to do that. And some of these cities I would have never, unless somebody told me that's where to go, I would never think this is where I should go as a single woman. Because they seem very random unless you live in those areas. For instance, there's like Southfield, Michigan, New Rochelle, New York, Missouri City, Texas. I would never think, hey, that's where all the men are at. Now, I do see like there's quite a few California cities, and they have like conveniently Compton, but they also have Moreno, they have Rancho Cucamonga. One that I really noticed was Alexandria, Virginia, which I'm thinking as a Black woman, that would make total sense to me. So I thought it was interesting that how some of these cities are set up. There's like either very rural areas that you can go to, or there are areas that seem highly populated. But either way it goes, it seems like you can find them in both places. It just kind of depends on where you're at, what city you're in, what the demographic is in those areas. I was thinking that Phoenix might be on the worst cities list for Black women. It wasn't. So that gives me a little bit of hope for where I'm at now. But I did notice that places like Miami, Florida, and Fort Lauderdale and Corpus Christi, areas with high Latina populations, I've found are really bad dating places for Black women. And that's interesting to me. And also places like that probably have a very low Black population, like Erie, PA, or Des Moines, Iowa. These are places that are on there too. Low Black population. So I thought, as a woman, how proactive are we personally being with setting ourselves up for success to find a partner over 30? And I don't know if we, I guess, take any personal accountability as to things like location. Also, thinking about, are we really putting ourselves out there? And I'm talking about beyond dating apps, out there in the world and different activities you're doing and how you're interacting. Are we really putting ourselves out there? Do we feel comfortable, putting ourselves out there? And, it can be scary. It can be really scary and disheartening, if you have been through a few relationships and they didn't work out and you're feeling kind of stuck. And also if you're a plus size woman, I'm a plus size woman myself. And I think that's just another hurdle that personally you deal with. You could have the greatest personality in the world, but I think you always, unfortunately, be looked over. And that is something that, for me, I'm very comfortable with myself, but it is something that I absolutely do pay attention to. That sometimes a guy will pick the skinnier girl, even though they have way more in common with the thick one. So I just find that hilarious. So I don't know. I'm still considered a millennial, which is funny to me to hear that, because I always hear people talk about millennials, and when they probably should be talking about Gen Z. I think they're confused as to what a millennial is, but I'm considered actually a millennial. And more than half of millennials don't have a steady partner, and only 28% are married. And when you think about being a millennial, we grew up in high school. We basically never lived our adult lives not being in war. And if you think about that, there's been like major crisis in our country through our entire adulthood. We have never not experienced crisis in our lives. We've never known what it felt like just to say, oh, we're not at war. I don't know what it feels like as an adult not to be in war. Then once we were able to get out of college, we ran into the recession, the 07-08 recession. So coming out of college, you're already hit with probably potential high levels of debt. Now you're fast forwarding, now we're dealing with a pandemic. And we're saddled with this debt that we've incurred because we were forced to get these degrees. And then on top of that, we're in a situation where the baby boomer generation can't afford to retire. So we cannot take over these higher paying jobs that we need to pay off said debt. So we're living at home. A lot of people are living at home for a long time. They're in really stressful financial situations, and it is impacting their ability to find partners and to be able to make those things happen. because financially, sometimes it's an issue. I'd be curious to know how many of you do you think finances has been a reason why you are still single over 30? And this could be men too. There are men out there that financially, they just did not feel prepared to be in a serious relationship, and it has held them back. And, they're now over 30, like, shit, like, have I missed my window? Like, what's happening? It's a very serious thing. So I don't know. I don't like to stress out about it, but it was definitely something that was on my mind today. I wanted to bring it to the Red Lipstick Club, talk it out a little bit, and honestly do a little self-therapy too, because I think we put so much pressure on ourselves and what we think things should look like, and what we grew up with, if it's different than what you're personally experiencing, it can be a lot of pressure. It can be a lot of pressure. And I think about myself personally, that the energy you give off can be felt, and desperation is without a doubt not the type of energy you want to give off. And I'm not at the point now where I just want to be with whoever just to avoid being alone, which I didn't know if I'd ever get to that point where I could say that, but I just refuse to settle for a mediocre connection, rather than just being on my own. So I don't know, tell me your thoughts. I'm going to keep it short and sweet this episode. I'm going to be talking about a whole bunch of different topics. Like I said, I'm looking forward to having some conversations about people that have dated after coming out of really long-term relationships, and what's that like for you, men and women. Also, I'm really excited about having an upcoming conversation about dating people with children when you don't have any. And I'm excited to hear some funny stories, some happy, maybe some sad, maybe some horror stories. I'm sure everybody has a whole bunch of them. But either way it goes, we just want to keep this open-hearted and judgment-free, and just giving people a space to kind of talk it out, and maybe meet some people in the comments that you can chat with. And who knows, maybe I'll help some people make a love connection or two in the Red Lipstick Club comment section. We'll also talk about life too, or sports. If you ever want to talk about sports with me, or you want me to chat about that, what's going on in the news and life in general, I'm totally down to talk about it. But I just want to thank everybody. Thanks for tuning in to my first episode of the Red Lipstick Club podcast. I look forward to you joining me on this journey. Stay safe, stay loved, stay blessed.